Hey, gang. I love Derek just getting us in without any warning whatsoever.
We don't have. Hey, look, we can't spring for the green room, so I don't know what to tell you. Like,
Yeah, Alex, the green room is like it's like this program's
it's like hundreds of dollars a
It's
month.
like hundreds of dollars more for the. I don't think. I mean, no offense, Jake. Maybe Jake might not be right on that one because every other podcast I know
I don't
has the
know.
green room. I think we should look into this.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alex, what's up, man? What's up, Derek?
I'm offended I didn't get the green room treatment. So yeah.
I
We've
mean,
had it
I'm
on the
offended
green
that
room.
I don't get the green room treatment. So you're not alone here, man.
We're both representing Alex with his Mexico jersey. With future American Prestige merch. Everybody, right here. Keep on rocking in the free world. Everyone see.
I'm still in World Cup mode.
Yeah, man. So, what do you think of the World Cup? Is it? We're not soccer fans here. Is it a good World Cup or a bad World Cup?
I think it was bad overall, but it depends on what angle you want to talk about.
Well, why is it bad?
I mean, I think the good things. I think the good things were Mexico looked really good relative to the U.S. as like countries, as culture, as hospitable cultures. I think the way that the U.S. treated fans from certain parts of the world, the way that they treated the Iranian national team, delighting in treating like shit people who were from the global South or the Iranian national team like the U.S. did was pretty embarrassing, even though the Trump administration seemed to revel in it. But then if you looked at like how Mexico treated fans and other teams, I think it was kind of cool to watch. But it was just a mess, man. I think it's a mess, and it's only going to get worse because the next World Cup they want to increase the size the number of teams. Trump wants it immediately back in the U.S. and now he's trying to put Johnny Baby as head of the UN. Yeah.
What?
As quickly as possible, he said.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Is it? I mean, don't the Saudis have it next? I don't know who's got the.
The next one is going to be a mess because it's a 100-year anniversary of the first one. So there's going to be some games in South America, like Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina are each going to get one game, but the actual World Cup will be shared between the Reconquista World Cup. It was Portugal, Spain, and Morocco.
Okay, all right.
That's really interesting. How was the style
fun for the teams that have to fly to and from South America?
And it might be 64 teams, apparently. So
what's it at now? 48?
48, which was not good. But
so yeah, I was going to ask, what was the play like? Was it like a good play? Like, how has football changed in recent years, Alex?
Well, football has been on a decline for a long time, right? Like with a common theme of American prestige, capitalism ruins everything. It's doing the same thing to football, to soccer. I think that there was a fear that some of the games are going to be really bad because you were going to have like Uzbekistan playing, I don't know, Ecuador or something. But I think in general, we had very few of those games. And there were some really cool surprise teams like Cape Verde, which was like, it's a tiny nation that actually played really well. And there were some really fun, good games. But no, I think it's with everything, like you guys talk about, capitalism is... The state of global capitalism is being reflected in the business of global soccer and product that they're putting on the field. And there's a pretty severe global North versus global South divide, which is unsurprising. But the actual kind of game that we get on the pitch, on the field, I think has been suffering for a long time as the sport has become much more commercialized. Eduardo Galeano has been wrote about this he traces this to like the 80s and the 90s. So this has been going on for a while.
What is, if as someone assume total ignorance, like, is the game less exciting? Is there less like what constitutes, like, I know people have a problem now with the NBA. They said it's just become a 3-point competition, and it's just the game is less exciting. Like, what has happened in the style of play that actually makes it different? Or is the style of play better? It's more athletic, but blah blah blah.
It's a bunch of things. It's definitely become ultra commercialized and professionalized. So every individual soccer player now wears like this thing under their jersey that kind of tracks like their movements. So like they're able to get data to about like kilometers run or calories expended. Like, so one of the critiques is that these players are becoming like almost like robotic, right? And the space for creativity or the impetus for creativity has been kind of removed by a more robotic style of play that emphasizes athleticism, that emphasizes winning at all costs. And we no longer have players who, at halftime were smoking cigarettes like in the 70s and 80s, who were like amazing footballers, but they could never keep up with the athleticism and the physical rigors and demands of the game today. And there's just the level of money involved in this is kind of crazy, right? So there's just a lot less. A lot of this starts at like the youth level with coaching and not encouraging players to be creative, but to win and to be conservative and not try new things, et cetera, et cetera. So like multiple levels.
So there's a rationalization process, but I have a question. So isn't this almost inevitable in sport when the goal is to win? You would have to sort of reframe that in some way, right? Or is the idea that in theory, if, as we all know, markets work perfectly, wouldn't there be someone who could come in and disrupt it by allowing creative play?
I mean,
why wouldn't that work?
It hasn't happened.
It's like the sabermetrics era, right? Like this is the whole thing. It's like it's like hyper rationalist, but it doesn't work in the real world because it's not a bounded. Basically, it's not a bounded game in the game theoretic sense, but in theory, sports are bounded games. So it's like the one space that this rational analysis would lend itself to, because like you would need creative play then in theory to overcome the rationalist.
Right. I think the way that we used to think about this is how every single country or culture had a unique expression of how they played the game. And that's been completely homogenized or taken out of the game because of global capitalism, because the shift of the epicenter of the economic epicenter of this sport has become Europe, right? So Brazil is a famous example. Brazil used to be known for being a really good national team, but also having a very distinct, creative, fun style of play. But in the last 10, 20, even 25 years, they've more or less, the national team at least has lost that distinction. And there's an ongoing conversation in Brazil that I think is really interesting that talks about a lot of young Brazilian players are being sold to European clubs at an early age. So by the time they become like senior professional players, they're actually more European in style and in training than they are Brazilian. So you get back to that old colonialist relationship between like global South countries selling their product cheap and then buying it in a more polished industrial manufactured form expensively, but it doesn't really help their national team. And this is one of the reasons why people have been making the argument that Brazil is just like, they suck. They have 5 World Cup titles, but they haven't won since 2002. And they've lost a lot of that creativity and flair that they were known for.
Has the style of play converged? This actually reminds me of like Thucydides, who would write like the Thebans fight like this, the Celts fight like that, the Gauls fight like that. And so you need to always arrange your Celts against your Thebans because they're like scimitars or whatever are different than that one. It's national style of play. But has there been a convergence like of play, and like they're all like sort of going, and then the best team is just the richest one? But Spain and Argentina, I guess they're relatively wealthy compared to Bolivia, but not to Germany. I would imagine.
Yeah, Argentina. Argentina is like the last hope of the global South, at least in the last couple of World Cups, in terms of being able to compete with some of the global, the European clubs. There has been. There's a premium placed on athleticism, on speed, on high press, right? So if you watch the World Cup, when the other team is taking the ball out, or their goalkeeper's trying to play the ball out of the back, their opposing team will just press the hell out of them, right? So there's a premium on speed, athleticism, high press, and it's become really, you see this in the European leagues where it's more or less one style of that. Defensively, you do a high press when you're a premium on recovering the ball as quickly as possible. A lot of fast touches on the ground, but very direct play. And you saw, there's still some teams who don't try to play like that, but they can't because most of, for whatever reasons, but maybe because their players don't play in some of the top European leagues.
Interesting. All All right, maybe we should turn to the topic that we were planning on talking about. Derek, do you want to intro it? Also, Derek, I'm very disappointed we haven't gotten any super chats yet. So,
well, I mean, we've been people don't respond to the sports, man. We're not sports people. Yeah. So I mean, Cuba, worst empire in history, or just the worst empire right now. Like this, the Cuban Empire is threatening the United States, the poor, innocent United States. And Alex, you read the terrifying, chilling State Department report about this. Are we all going to be speaking what I assume is Cuban? I don't know enough to say what the language is, but are we all going to be speaking Cuban soon? Like what's going on, man? You know, will we at least get some cigars out of it? Because I could live with that, I think. But yeah, so
cigars or rum?
What's going on, man?
It was a terrifying read. No, it's 21st century communism is being spread by Cuba throughout the world. It's like reading this report. It's like the movie Red Dawn. I mean, that's what it really reminded me of. It's the idea that you have the poor United States. It doesn't bother anybody. It's just existing, and it's getting attacked and invaded by the Cubans and Nicaraguenses and the Soviets. And it's going to be saved by a bunch of plucky high school guerrilla fighters in the highlands of Colorado, right? Like, it's a really strange document. It's got some funny things in it. I think I think it's mostly AI produced because it makes some really funny references to like some newer scholarship and historiography on Cold War Latin America, which I think is really funny. I think they're citing Piero Glejeses, and they're talking about the difference between the Latin American old left and the Latin American new left. So I'm like, it's AI. There's no way there's State Department people working for this administration who have kept up with the historiography of the Cold War in Latin America.
Maybe they have, Alex. Maybe. Yes, is it Junior? Am I remembering the name correctly? Is there a Junior there or no?
Maybe.
I think there is.
I think so. Yeah. So it's an interesting document in that. Well, one, it talks about 21st century communism, and it doesn't really provide a definition for what 21st century communism is, other than Cuban communism is a really dangerous form of revolutionary leftism because it's not just trying to overthrow the United States; it's trying to overthrow all of Western civilization.
Of course, I mean that they can't keep the lights on because the United States turned off the oil spigot, but they're trying to overthrow all of Western civilization and have been since 1959. They've apparently been really bad at it
since 1959 and in very insidious ways, right? So this is the difference between the Soviet Union, according to this document. The way that they're doing it is by infiltrating American society and exacerbating certain I mean, they wouldn't refer it to this, but they're exacerbating racial grievance, for example, or they're trying to take over universities, or they're working with the National Lawyers Guild.
Which is that not the same shit that the U.S. Because right wingers used to say about the Soviet Union in the heart of the Cold War, like they were exacerbating racial grievances in the U.S. and doing all this all these nefarious things. Like it's just insane how much smaller the circle gets. Like Cuba, it's Cuba now. Yeah.
It's the American gesture. Anytime there's racial grievance, the American move is to say it's foreign exacerbated or foreign derived. I mean, we saw this with the Democrats after 2016, right? It was the Russian bots who were somehow responsible for BLM and re-instigating, because racism was like, okay. And then it was the Russian bots that came in and kind of reminded everybody that racism exists in the US. And then you started going at it with one another. And that's I mean, it's an old dynamic that goes back to, I don't know how long. We can go back to a while, but it's interesting because the Soviet Union gets a little bit of reprieve from this because the emphasis is to cast Cuba as the destroyer of worlds, of Western civilizational worlds. But they don't do it through military means. They do it through spies. They do it through infiltration of institutions in the United States. They do it by funding DSA, by funding.
Obviously. I mean, it's been right there in front of us the whole time.
So ridiculous.
There's one quote. Where is it? Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so there's a section where they're talking about the difference between Cuban and Soviet spies and why the Cubans are so much better at like infiltrating American society. And they quote one retired US official who put it bluntly in 2002 when he said, quote, "The Cubans were much more successful in bringing people aboard and gathering information because they were Latin and they were kind of glamorous. We're much more open to Latins than we are to people with steel teeth and a Slavic accent."
What? Oh, yeah,
Which is,
obviously.
Yeah, and that's like
so
good neighbor policy, the good neighbor era stuff about like the Latin lover in like Hollywood movies. That's so
God, damn.
absurd.
I mean, you know that your conspiracy theories on strong legs when you bust out the calipers to explain why the
Yeah,
Cuban
which-
communists are more dangerous than the Slavic communists. Jesus Christ.
the Latin. I mean, that's like if you go back. I mean, you can read, you know, obviously like newspaper, U.S. media in the 50s and 60s, but even like CIA declassified documents, they place a lot of premium on explaining Latin behavior on like blood, right? So the Latin capacity for brooding or revenge or bloody purges, like that stuff, you're gonna find that stuff in a declassified CIA document from the 60s or 70s. The U.S. didn't teach them how to do death squads. No. They're ultra violent because of Spanish colonialism. And because of that Latin brooding and revenge.
Yeah, the U.S. didn't appoint the head of all the internal police, the heads of state for 50 years.
No, it did not set up national guards throughout Latin America.
Yeah, and then appoint the heads of them. That was like all of them, right? In the 20s and the 30s, like Somoza, like all of them were like
Haiti, all of them.
Yeah.
Before they left, the last thing they would do.
Yeah. It's literally U.S. derived.
So I need to cut through the bullshit here and get to the heart of the question. What does this show have to do to get put on this fucking administration's enemies list? Like, why are we not in this?
Eric,
report?
I've already been banned from Russia. I have nowhere to go anymore. Maybe
deeply irritated by this.
will help me. Sheinbaum.
Yes. Claudia Sheinbaum will accept you with open arms in Mexico. There's a long Mexican tradition of accepting exiles, right? Throughout the 20th century.
Eric Fromm, right? Like this is one of the Frankfurt School went to Mexico City, I believe, first, and when I think it was Eric Fromm in the 30s, and then obviously he was very influential.
Did either of you? This is an aside, but did either of you ever see the movie The Day After Tomorrow when all the U.S. climate refugees?
Yes.
Oh hell yeah!
Oh yeah. That's with Jake Gyllenhaal, right?
Like man, yeah.
Roland Emmerich, yeah.
Not one of for Roland Emmerich, a little bit on the nose, like a little bit, hammering people over the head with it.
I always tell my history of Mexico class. I tell this story that when I first watched that movie, I was on a bus in Mexico traveling to Michoacan in December, and that's when like millions of Mexicans go from the US to Mexico to celebrate the holidays. And I'm on this like bus on the way to visit my family in Michoacan, and it's packed with people. And they're showing this movie. And when when they show that scene of Americans being denied entry to Mexico, the whole bus erupts and claps. Like they were just like, ah!
Dude, I have a very similar story. I saw World War Z in a Mexico movie theater. And at the very end, the epilogue, they're like saying like, Berlin has fallen. And then when they say Mexico City has fallen, the whole crowd erupts in cheers. It's one of the biggest laughs I ever had. You had to be listening to really get it. That's one of my favorite movie experiences. So, okay. So what do we make of this report? I mean, it seems like a blend of like traditional anti-communism, Cold War style anti-communism with a soupçon of contemporary Trump style trying to make the left into this boogeyman that it really was in the 40s and the 50s, but forgetting that in the 40s and the 50s, one of the reasons that it was able to be a boogeyman was because there was a genuine left in the 30s and the 40s, and it was actually part of the New Deal coalition. So again, you have this rhyming 20th century thing, but without the actual object against which people could, direct their ire. I mean, say what you will about the DSA. It's not the Communist Party of the United States of America in the 1930s and 40s. So what should we actually analytically make of this before we all erupt into hysterics, as it were?
Yeah, I think it's more about the domestic enemies list, right? Like, we talked about this on Tuesday with Spencer Ackerman. Like, you don't have a domestic terrorism law that works really in the way that the Trump administration wants it to. Although Trump declared was it Antifa or it wasn't the DSA, but it was something he declared domestic terrorists. Like that has no legal standing. He just said that because it sounded good coming out of his mouth. So you need to like really turn the engine of the war on terror against domestic political opponents. You have to have a foreign angle to make that work. And so, Cuba is very convenient, I guess. I mean, it's not very compelling, but on that, in that sense, I think they're just dabbing. I mean, they're like, yeah, it's Cuba. Who cares? Like, who gives a shit? Nobody's going to stop us. Like, we don't need to make a coherent argument here. So I think it's mostly that, but there is, I mean, this is coming. Like the Maduro middle of the night operation is coming for Cuba when they feel like they have Iran under control. I don't think there's any question about that. So it's partly that too, but I think mostly it's about following up on this thing that Rubio did last week, where they're trying to make basically a domestic enemies list and use the machinery that we've built up over the last 25 years against it.
Derek, I do want to. Why do you think it's actually coming for Cuba? Because Iran was such a disaster, Venezuela was a success. You just think it's going to come regardless.
And Cuba probably. I think they feel like Cuba they could do. I mean, they felt this way about Iran too, which shows what kind of geniuses you're working with here. But I think they feel like they can do Cuba in a way that is more reminiscent of Venezuela, over and done and quick. And we got our person in Havana. And they'll do that to try and wash out some of the sour taste of Iran. That's partly why I think it's coming, at least. And the other reason is they're just, he's like settling scores, I guess. Like his brain died in the 1980s, and that's still the same list of bad guys that he's got in his head. So he's just going after them one by one.
He'll invade Libya. Alex, what do you think is going on here?
I think it's a domestic enemies list, but for that to work, you need an outside shadowy presence that's pulling the strings for it to be, I think, really effective. And this is, I think, why we get such a hodgepodge of groups on this list, right? And if we think about the stuff that like Ken Kleppenstein's been reporting on, that NSPM 7, right? Like now even including like data center protesters as like terrorists. They didn't make it into this report, but I'm sure if they do an update, the State Department will say that Cuba is behind the data center protests as well. Because I think the move
it's the inherent Latin opposition to data. I mean, you have to understand it's in the genes, the genetics of these people.
Yeah, we just are, we're constantly just partying and doing the mañana habit. Right?
Exactly.
We don't believe in data. I think so. It works. I think the domestic enemies list works best when there's an outside entity pulling the strings, because then you can say, and this is what this report says, nothing is wrong with the U.S. What's wrong is that outsiders are fomenting problems within the U.S. that don't exist without those outsiders intervening. So this is what I mean. The section on like BLM is really funny, right? They go back and they're blaming BLM on like Robert F. Williams and like Malcolm X, and trying to connect using these like new left black figures and Cuba and trying to connect that to like BLM of 2014 to this very day, right? Because again, there's nothing wrong with U.S. civilization, which is another thing, right? The civilizational talk I think is interesting, but it's only when outsiders come in and start fucking around that they're the ones who are creating the problems. Mexico, I think, only comes up once, which I was like, and migration's not, right, which is interesting. But again, I also think we've talked about this before, Derek, and I think I even wrote something like this for foreign exchanges, is that there's also like a very South Floridian political culture angle to, like, the Cold War never ended there. And like thinking about an audience for this, like I think most people would kind of laugh and say this is like a new Red Dawn, but in certain parts of the countries and communities, like this makes, I think, sense, right? It provides an explanatory framework for things like BLM in 2020. Like when you saw BLM movements in Miami in 2020, you had a really anti-Blackness and anti-communism in South Florida come together to push back against BLM in that particular part of the country. So, yeah, in certain communities and in certain minds, the Cold War has never ended. Cuba, I think as long as Iran keeps doing what they're doing, that's actually going to provide a little bit of potential protection for Cuba. I don't think Cuba will go the way of Venezuela as well. I think, if anything, the Cubans are learning from Venezuela, and they're realizing what the Iranians are realizing, that this is an existential fight for them. So what do you do in that regard? So even if you, even though Cuba is having 3, 4, 5, national electrical blackouts a week, like that doesn't negate the fact that they know that this is an existential struggle for them. So what do they do in that context? So that wasn't perhaps the case in Venezuela in January when they launched this operation to kidnap Maduro, who, like, I don't know if you guys saw, but like his case is not even, the trial's not even going to begin until like next year, like a year from now.
Right.
And it might get thrown out on like a bunch of technicalities. So it's like, yeah, anyway.
Well, that'll be interesting to see what they do with him at that point, because they're not going to let him go back to Venezuela. Like, what are they going to do if that actually
they just drop him off at a bus station like an American prison? He just gets out, and you're on your own, dude.
Do you think part of the complication with Cuba is like, I've thought about this, like I don't think there's a Maduro-esque figure. Like, are you gonna nab 5-year-old Raul Castro, who doesn't have an official position anymore? Like, is that the play? Like, I don't think going in and abducting Miguel Diaz-Canel, although he is president of Cuba, I don't think would have the same effect that taking Maduro out of that situation had on Venezuela. So to me, that's like part of the confounding thing here, is what would it even look like?
They haven't made the case for it. Like Maduro, they started making the case for him since like 2020, right? So they worked for like at the very end of the first Trump administration. So they took their time to build this supposed case against Maduro that then justified what they did in January. They're not even trying for the Cubans. And like, who are they going to take? Like, you're not going to take a 95. I mean, I guess they could take a 95-year-old man, but like, that's like, what does that look like?
To what end? Yeah. What does that do?
Yeah. So, I mean, and it might be popular in, again, like South Florida and maybe 1 or 2 other parts of the country, but like that doesn't accomplish anything. Right. So I think this is why they've been doing the strangulation on the cheap, right? Like scaring the shit out of other Latin American countries like Mexico from sending oil, and just slowly strangling this island to death. I mean, honestly, like you have kids you have babies and children who have died, right? Because they haven't been able to get the electricity to the hospitals where they were seeking treatment, right? So this is a genocidal strangulation that's a lot slower than what we're witnessing in other parts of the world. But I think that's what they're trying to accomplish.
So Danny, we got a super chat. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. But yeah, we should answer this.
I'll remember that. But this is for both you guys. What is the state of the Cuban military? Because obviously one of the big differences between Venezuela and Iran is Iran has been preparing for this exact thing for decades, and has a significant military force. Like, do we know what's going on with the Cuban military?
What was that leak that they did a few weeks ago? Like that the Cubans have been amassing millions of drones, waiting to descend on every American city.
I hope.
Yeah. Seriously, like don't threaten me with a good time, guys. Come on. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, Alex. You can maybe answer that more effectively. All I know is there was that ridiculous story about all the drones.
I don't know. I mean, I think the one thing I know is that they are willing to fight. I mean, if the people who fought in the operation to kidnap Celia Flores and Nicolas Maduro were Cubans, right? Like a bunch of them were killed. So I don't know like what their technological capacity is. I don't know what their situation with drones is, but like I think they've been training for this since like 1960, 61, right? So I mean, I think there is a willingness to fight now. And if you were to believe all the propaganda that the Trump administration and Democratic administrations have put out for decades now, the Cuban military takes all of the economic resources from the country, right? So if there's going to be if we are to believe that, then the one part of Cuban society or the Cuban government that is well-funded or well-resourced, it would be the military, right? With all their supposed state-owned, military-owned state companies that are stealing money from everyday Cubans. And according to Marco Rubio, that's what's the cause of everyday Cubans not having electricity or food or water, medicine, etc. But again, they're 90 miles from the U.S. So, and this is the problem with Venezuela as well, in relative to like Iran. It's just the distance of, you have the ability to project power in the Caribbean from the U.S. is just so much greater than, you know, on the other side of the world. That, and right now, as they're being debased, right, like they're being even more, they're going to get kicked out of that region if they don't change strategy soon. But in Latin America, I mean, they're right there, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind.
So we were talking about the domestic enemies list. Again, like, this is something we've seen before in American history. Does Trump have the capacity to do anything? Derek has been talking about the proverbial knock at the midnight door. Knock at the door at midnight, knock at the midnight door. That sounds like a metal album from 1998. What do you think could actually happen? They're gonna send ICE to arrest Twitch streamers. They're going to raid the DSA's offices and find what what do you think we're actually?
I stand by my former prediction of domestic drone strikes, but let's.
Derek's been predicting domestic drone strikes since Trump was elected. But what do you think we're looking at here? I mean, ICE got pushed back, granted, after a serious sacrifice in Minnesota. Trump is incredibly unpopular, likely to lose in the midterms. Is this a pathetic gasp, or is this, you know, something more? Maybe I could tell, you could tell by my tone what I think it likely is.
Yeah, no, I've listened to you enough, Danny, where I know where you stand on this. I don't know. I don't know. I think to act on this domestic enemies list would require, I think, something unprecedented in American history. If they're attacking if they're defining domestic entities in the broad way that they're doing so in this document and in other ways. Because I don't know, I think there's certain communities and peoples in this country, past and present, who have been subject to the type of state power that you are asking me about in terms of being projected to U.S. society at large. And I don't, like I said, I think that would have to be something unprecedented, or it's another way to look at it. And this is like Spencer's work, right? Like, this has been building up since post 9/11. And it's just, as you're living through it, how do you kind of periodize it? How do you mark a moment where this is something new, or this is like the beginning of a new era where it is authoritarian or fascistic or whatever you want to define it? But what I do know that there is certain communities in this country right now, even during the second Obama administration, that have been living in terror because they've had Border Patrol and ICE and other, I don't know, 10 other border security police outfits who have been terrorizing their communities, right? And now
they've been terrorized for decades. I mean, as you know better than I. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And not to exclude communities, particularly border communities in the southwestern United States and elsewhere, people of Mexican and Latin American descent. Absolutely. But as you know, this is a continuing issue in American politics. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I think what we're witnessing right now is something akin to like what happened during like Operation Wetback in the 1950s, right? Where you did have the deployment of U.S. military personnel and other security forces internally to deport more than 1 million people, right? We haven't seen the mass deportations, right? So that is something. Hopefully, I mean, they keep threatening with, but I don't even know if they have the capacity or the ability to do it. But that is,
or the design. I mean, like, mass deportations hits these people where they live. Like, these are, you know, this is workforce that you're, you know, cheap workforce that you're getting rid of.
Right. And this is like the contradiction that we talked about, Danny, last year, right? Like, at what point would the business class pressure Trump with like, cut this shit out, right? You're ruining agriculture, agribusinesses, you're ruining the service economy, you're ruining tourism. And there still is, I mean, I think I just saw an article this morning or yesterday that the pro mass deportation people are fighting it out with like the business class within Trump's coalition. So it's an ongoing struggle. But yeah, I don't know.
This is what I think. I mean, I think there's a potential limiting factor here, which is you have the like really dead-eyed people in this administration, like Stephen Miller, Sebastian Gorka, like that crowd that really genuinely wants to follow through on like the worst impulses of everything that they're doing, versus a group that I mean outranks them in many ways. Like, you know, you've got JD Vance and Marco Rubio who want to have political futures. Like, they want to get elected president. They want to run for president. And if you've got the stain of you know what these people could really do with what they're trying to enact on your record, unless you're going to just get rid of elections and say fuck it, we're going to do could do things differently, like that's a real limiting factor. And then at the top of the pyramid, you have a man whose biggest goal in life is to sell his truths you know, point 0.5 milliseconds early to Wall Street firms so that they can get a jump on insider trading. Like, that's the level that he's at. He wants to fly around in his $400 million Qatari jet, which he's pissed off now that they're taking away from him because it wasn't safe to be in if somebody's going to take a shot at him. And just, like, you know, make as much money as he possibly can out of having this job. And I don't know if those things come into conflict at some point, but I know that they're not necessarily pointing in the same direction.
And just to build off of what Alex said, it's always surprised me, and I'm not sure how many people know, but the big three anti-communist and really anti-communist acts of the 40s and the 50s, which were the the Alien Registration Act of 1940, the Internal Security Act of 1950, and the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, which were really passed as sort of like security. First one, anti-fascist, this latter two, anti-communist. Only like several hundred European exiles wound up being arrested, and most of them weren't deported, and like way more people of Mexican descent were arrested under these like anti-communist acts. So that's always struck me in like the history of American immigration. You have these like political anti-left things, and then it's actually just Mexican people of Mexican descent and Mexican Americans who wound up getting deported, which is like, just to build off what Alex was saying, I think you could see something like that happen here. These like anti-left wing things, but in practice, like, a lot of those people are embedded in their communities in a way that, you know, immigrant labor isn't. And so that's
or like it'll be, you know, Palestine activists who are here on student visas and you know, even up to the point maybe of naturalized citizens, although I don't think they'll go that far, but people who are on green cards or student visas, things that you can revoke, who are advocating for Palestine. Like, that's one that I think will be,
and that's the trend.
For sure.
Yeah, and Operation Wetback, I think, is part of that larger process. Like, you have this anti-communist thing, and you're actually going against, you know, the racialized immigrants who do most of the labor, which is, I think, something that you could definitely see happening here. Anything else on this topic, guys, or should we go to our super chat?
We should
the
answer
only
our super
chat. I'm very disappointed. Alex, I don't know if you watch these streams. The end of every chat, I say everyone's my personal friend. I'm not sure I'm going to say it this time.
I don't know about tonight.
Tonight, I don't think they're going to do it. So this is what @DrewZelda asks. Speaking of domestic enemies, what about the quote anti-tech extremism unquote against AI? Trump said today something very pro data center. So what do you think is going to happen with AI and data? I mean, I think the entire American stock market is built on AI speculation.
Yeah,
so
I mean, what are you going to do?
Get
like,
away from that one. I think the stock market would be crashing or would be significantly reduced, and all of our 401ks would not be as high as they presently are right now without it. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Derek.
I don't know. Like, it's hard for me. Like, this is not, it doesn't even seem like a 50-50 issue. Like, people seem generally turned off by data centers. There's like a NIMBY movement against data centers. There's fears about, you know, water use. I mean, we talked about this with Bob Wright a couple of weeks ago, I think. And you know, he kind of downplayed the water stuff. I guess maybe they're getting better at like recycling water or minimizing water use, but like electricity, you know, people's electricity rates going up. Like, I don't know. There's just not a lot of love for these things. So I don't know how Trump is going to turn it into a cause celeb that he thinks is gonna really resonate with people.
I like having data centers in Arizona. where we are famously known for having massive amounts of water.
Massive amounts of water that
Yeah.
were being bought up by Saudi businessmen, weren't they? Like, wasn't that a thing?
Oh, Christ on the cross.
Yeah, they were using massive amounts of water to grow alfalfa in eastern Arizona, so they could then ship that for their racing horses. That was
a perfect use of water in water-rich region.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem there. Yeah.
No problem. It's Fury Road. Shortly. It's people really hate AI for I think really good reasons, but I've heard you guys talk about this and others. It is like, what else is this economy like currently built on?
Yeah.
I mean, I see it. We see it in our universities, right? We have university leadership at my place, at my employer at least, who are pushing us to use AI in a variety of different ways, not really giving us much instruction of how to use it. But then there's a lot of resistance at the staff level, at the faculty level, and at the student level. So there's all sorts of internal contradictions in terms of like, I don't know if you guys saw, but ASU rolled out a beta version of something called ASU Atomic, where some AI program basically used online lectures and kind of chopped them up and put them together into something else that they could sell to people. So if you had a question about like the Crusades, you could have a ready-made, chopped up, a glamour, like a combination of different online lectures that ASU professors had put together, but hadn't been told that their material was going to be packaged and resold in this way. As you can imagine, my colleagues and I are pretty upset that this is being done. It's also really badly done. So it makes the video look bad. It makes the university looks bad. And it makes the professors look like dumbasses because the work is being chopped up in a really weird way. But again, what is AI good at, right? It's good at propping up this economy right now. It's really good at
it's good at eliminating
identifying quote unquote military targets. What else?
No, not really. We get schools.
We hit schools, right? So
I don't know, Alex. I don't know if you've heard me say this on the show. I think that in a few years they're going to. So two things. One, I think there's going to be big intellectual property fights between professors and universities because apparently we were talking about this where I am, and it's vague. There's like not clear distinctions about who actually owns the intellectual property. Yeah. You don't necessarily sign all away your intellectual property because if you leave a university, you could use those lectures again, right? Which has been happening since the beginning of the modern American university system. So I think that fight is coming because like that would not be allowed if you, Alex, own your IP, etc. I also think that will probably, I bet, be decided in favor of faculty. I think they're going to start offering buyouts to the IP of professors. Like, here's $2 million. We have Professor Alex Avina. I know, I take it too. We have Professor Alex Avina forever. You know, like the historical profession is over, but that's happening anyway. So get the bag. And now we have the history of Latin America and the Cold War for the entirety. And like you pay some adjunct.
That's how I achieve eternity. Yes.
Yeah, that's how you achieve. You'll enter the singularity. Pay someone every 3 years $1,000 to update it. And they have all your voices, and now why would they don't even need faculty any longer. I think that sort of thing is coming actually, where they're just going to buy your intellectual property rights. I do want to talk about the 2 super chats. One was please love us, Danny.
I have to add though to that because I've said this on the show before. My faculty advisor in grad school used to say that he thought the university would eventually be reduced to like 10 people working in the library all day, and then like they'd get people from central casting to deliver the lectures, and they just do the same lectures over and over again. But I mean, that was 20 years ago. He was not I think ready for the AI revolution, because now you don't even need central casting.
No,
it's just perfect. As you said, pay an adjunct every couple of years to update the lecture notes and feed it into the AI, and you're done.
It's a good business model, right? If capitalism, as we all think, has probably stopped truly growing, that there's this falling rate of profit, then you just need to get rid of labor, and you could get rid of labor.
Right.
Some one-time upfront fee. How many years' salaries is this going to save? And you could just have sort of the university of the future. All right, so let's get to these chats. Please love us, Danny. that depends on you. It doesn't depend on me. Make me love you. And then someone paid $10 Canadian, which is like $1.50 American, but I'll answer it anyway. Danny, do you still think the U.S. will remain hegemonic in the Middle
So
East?
dismissive of foreign currencies.
Well,
on the
after
show.
Mark
That's
Carney
offensive.
pretended to be a bad boy, and then he was just a normal boy when Iran
Well, I
happened,
mean, yeah, Canada hasn't earned
I
any
haven't.
respect, I guess,
I
yeah.
think I'm okay with that. So, Danny, do you still think the U.S. will remain hegemonic in the Middle East, given destruction of U.S. assets, declining importance of the region with switch to green energy, Israel's support becoming partisan? I would even add Israel's support becoming, more of a third rail going forward. I mean, at the moment, yes. Because I don't think that anyone else is going to step in. I don't think China has an interest. Russia has the capacity. And I don't think Saudi or Iran is powerful enough to exert true regional hegemony. So at the moment, I still think yes. But of course, we have to wait to see how things will shake out. What I can say is I think it is the intention of the present administration to retain hegemony. And I'm not sure what a next administration will do. Depends who's elected. If it's Gruesome Gavin Newsom, probably not much change. If it's AOC, probably more change. If it's Buttigieg, I think he's trying to figure out what's going on himself. So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about the U.S. and the Middle East as the Iran war drags on?
It's going great, no, for the U.S. No, I think it's interesting to think about you mentioned Russia and China, Danny. I mean, they actually don't need to do a lot, right, to exercise some form of influence. I mean, if the reporting is true and they're providing intel and technology to the Iranians are doing okay. But with the help that the indirect or the minimal help that they're getting from these two countries, particularly Russia's entangled in their own kind of crazy situation. But I think, one of the things I keep thinking about is those FPV drones that Hezbollah was using in southern Lebanon. And that's like, the flying Kalashnikov of our era, right, has completely changed the dynamics of warfare and how and what regional hegemony can even look like. If you have one person who's able to fly these things that cost $500 to make, and maybe let's say another $500 for the explosive to take out military units or tanks or other expensive hardware, like in the long run, it might take a while, but in the long run, U.S. regional hegemony, unless it goes through some radical political, economic, and ideological shift when it comes to the military industrial complex, and the things are not looking good for U.S. empire in that region. This is one of the reasons why I think we see Trump just kind of lashing out, and it worries me, right? It scares me that because of this seeming defeat or inability to shape reality on the ground, he's going to do something insane, and he's already kind of insane. So, that's the thing that really worries me in terms of what can happen in the next, in the short term.
Yeah, temperamentally, I feel the same way. Like, he's not equipped to do this like low level. It's already not low level, but the idea when they return to strikes, I think, was supposed to be keep it at a low maintenance level, and we'll just run it out until the Iranians get tired. But I don't think temperamentally he's capable of doing that. So that makes the risk of escalation real and troubling. In terms of like what the U.S. is going to do, I don't know. I've been surprised at how quickly they've emptied out all the bases. I mean, I get it. I understand why this has been gone really badly for them. So I get it, but I'm still surprised at it. And I don't know now what the case is that you make to go back into those places. What good did any of them serve? They just painted targets on the countries where they're located, and you had to evacuate them anyway. What was the point of having them in the first place? And maybe people will ask that. Maybe somebody in a position of some authority after 2028 will ask that question, and we'll see what happens. But there's also, like, leaving aside Israel, leaving aside even the idea that there's some new Cold War competition here between the US and China for the region or for the energy or whatever, like, leaving all of those things aside, the last refuge for the blob in situations like this, which I think is still gonna be a problem, is if the US isn't here, setting down order and bringing, showing the way, lighting the torch of stability and freedom, then who's going to take up the mission of guiding these poor downtrodden peoples? And like that's a real thing. That's a real tendency in the blob. At least the idea of maintaining stability, forgetting that the U.S. is a source of instability, especially in this region, but in most places, you can't say that and get invited to the cocktail party, so nobody believes that in D.C. That I think is still going to be there, like, and it's only going to be reinforced by what's happened here. It's going to be, Trump is an aberration. He messed up, but look at how badly things can go off course if you don't have a steady hand at the wheel in this part of the world, and how much damage that can cause. And obviously the US, even though we're the ones who caused it, the US is best positioned to play that role. So I think that's going to be the pull, even for, maybe not for a President AOC. Well, I think that's very unlikely that she's going to be president. But for a Buttigieg, even if he, discards all the other arguments, I think it's going to be hard for him to shed that one. So I do think, at least for the near term, that the U.S. is going to feel like it has to stay.
Well, Derek, as you know, we've got a little birdie told us there are people in the administration, both this one and the current last one, who have listened to us. So maybe they'll take our advice.
Yes, and I keep calling Donald Trump a senile old idiot, and I can't get on his enemies list. Come on, man.
Put Derek on the
listening
enemies list.
to the
I've been on
show.
enough enemies lists for my time. Sorry, Alex, please. And then we got some more, not super chats. I would say middling chats, but we'll go then.
I was in Canada earlier this year, and it was really funny to see people walking around with the button that had 51 with like the line crossed out, which was so good. I laughed every time I saw that. No, Danny, the point about bases, like in thinking about like Daniel Immerwahr's book, right? The Pointillist Empire, that the bases don't make sense anymore. Like Danny, your piece that you wrote about the Millennium Games, right? With those war games that they simulated against Iran in the early 2000s, like that bases made sense then. Mm-hmm. They don't make sense now, because
I agree.
Look at the missiles and the drone, especially the drones too. But like the missile technology that Iran has, you're just leaving your soldiers there to like die.
You can't predict power, right? I think you're right. Like the Kalashnikov reference. I mean, it's basically like the machine gun, right? Like now you can't do trench warfare any longer. And I think the drones have raised like existential hinge point type stakes for how do you project power abroad. And of course, Iran is not in terms of those lives lost there, but in terms of greater geopolitical stakes, sideshow, which is Taiwan, right? I mean, which is the hinge point for a particular type of American empire that, as we all know, has been sought since the late 19th century, which is the U.S. being able to project power into East Asia. That just seems impossible now. I think that just seems impossible, that you can't do it in the age of drone warfare. And Iran has shown that. And also, I'm actually going to write a piece about this for my soon-to-be launched Substack, everyone, titled Imperialist Realism, coming to a Substack near you. But one of the things that I want to write about is that, like, this problem of projecting power in the 21st century, it's just like a total reconfiguration of geopolitics in a way that we really haven't seen.
No, I think guerrilla warfare and our asymmetrical warfare has entered a new stage. I mean, if Ansar Allah can scare the hell out of the U.S. Navy, and make aircraft carriers do crazy turns and lose airplanes, multi-million-dollar airplanes into the Red Sea, I mean, that's a new phase, right? And if you think about the history of aerial warfare to begin with, it starts as like a colonial policing thing with like Libya and the Italians, right, in the early 1910s. I think it took more than a century to balance out the logic or the equation or the balance of forces between the more powerful imperialist forces and people resisting them. And now, because of drones and because of the missile technology, things are a lot more balanced, right? So I think to watch those FPV drone videos from southern Lebanon, and to see what the Iranians have been doing, and to see what Ansar Allah has been doing, I mean, it is guerrilla warfare, but at a new stage, right? And it's going to be interesting to see how
So
right
I
now
think
we're seeing how the U.S. is trying to respond, and they can't. I mean, there's severe limits on their responses.
Well, I think this is the rub there. I think yes and no. So I think yes when you're talking about projecting power far from your borders, but if you're talking about projecting power, let's say from the U.S. into Latin America or from the China into Taiwan, it actually still favors the imperial presence in that situation,
No,
right? So it's like, so this is why I made that argument in the ideas letter about like we are entering a sphere of influence system where in some degree the difficulty of far power projection will be replaced by more of an ease of close power projection, because it is much easier to send drones to Mexico from the United States.
But that would I would make the argument that Mexico's the exception, and Mexico's the exception because of a 2,000-mile long border that does give Mexico certain leverage. So that's the one place.
And Mexico always has more leverage vis-a-vis the United States as well. Like, I mean, Mexico is not a good. Mexico's like a major power in a way that most other countries, and Mexico and Brazil are, I think, distinct, in Colombia to some degree. So I agree with that. I agree with that. Maybe Colombia less now, but I think there was a capacity previously in history, whatever, but blah, 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 blah. No, but I think you're right. But I think like China is now going to be able to threaten Vietnam, let's say, and threaten Taiwan and threaten Japan and threaten South Korea, which were under the US defense umbrella because of drones. So you have this interesting thing where I think like space is important as well here, that Iran could challenge the United States because it's so far from the United States. So it reframes colonialism as something that you were able to do very far away from your borders into something I think is going to be much more difficult going forward. I totally agree.
Yeah, and I think there's certain geographical choke points that also are extremely valuable where you don't need nuclear weapons, but if you control the Strait of Hormuz, why would you need a nuclear weapon? You have the global economy at your disposal. So I think that, but I totally agree, Danny. I think that, and this is why in the National Security Strategy document, they talk about coming back to the Americas.
Right.
And going back to our initial discussion of domestic enemies, I think in U.S. history, like every time U.S. empire suffers some sort of defeat abroad, it always comes back to Latin America and starts beating the shit out of Latin America, or it starts to beat the shit out of Latin American peoples living in the U.S. through anti-immigrant politics and policies. And I think this is what we're witnessing right now. I think that's the connection between what's going on in far-flung parts of the world in terms of U.S. empire and what's happening in the Americas and what's happening domestically with migrant communities.
I mean, it's totally right. Like, it's not a surprise that this heated up as the war on terror started to get fucked in the 2010s. You know, that all this anti-immigrant sentiment heated up. So we got a couple of chats. First one is, what are the responses to marks you've referred to? Don't quite know what that means. So if you wouldn't mind clarifying, Weir 523. And then Tom Strand, friend of the pod, says, Alex, what's an underrated Mexican film? So Alex, what's an underrated Mexican film?
Oh man, underrated Mexican film. The one that I post about and I would always post about and tell people to watch is called El Violín.
El Violín. Tell us a little bit about it. Get people excited to put it on their letterbox.
El Violín came out in the 2000s. It's in black and white, and it follows the adventures of an elderly violin player who befriends a military officer as they're waging a horrific counterinsurgency in southern Mexico. And it turns out that elderly violin player is the father of some of the guerrilla leaders. So it's based on the history that I write about in my book, and it's a really powerful film. If you can get past the really rough first scene that shows military torture, but it's a wonderful film.
Good. I mean, Alex, as Tom said correctly, that's way too much for $1.99. But don't worry, folks, it's not going to happen again. All right, before we go, everybody, any other final chats you want to throw as we have Alex online? Anything about Latin America? Anything you want to ask me and Double D over here? D squared. What would be your rap name, Derek? D squared is pretty good.
Really have never thought about it.
All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Mac
4,
Derek.
3.
I could see Mac Derek being like your
Mac Derek's pretty good. Mine was
Derek.
Mine was
there you go.
LEF, like DEF -D, because my name begins with D and I'm left-handed. That's a pretty good one. Lefty. All right, everyone. Thank you as always for listening. Enjoy news tomorrow. Everyone who did a super chat is my personal friend. Everyone else is not a personal friend. You've been demoted, but we'll talk to you soon. I love you all. Bye.
All right, bye guys. Thanks, Alex,
Bye,
for
guys.
doing the
Yeah,
doing the
thanks,
live
guys,
stream.
Alex. Really
Of course,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Where can tell people where to check your workout actually before we go?
So, my lord. So, just go on Twitter at Alexander_Avina is where I do my shit posting. I'm trying to finish my book, so I've been trying to do
Mazel.
that. But
When your book
we'll
comes
see.
out,
Nice.
we'll have you on again. And
Yeah,
Alex did a
absolutely.
series with us on Guerrero. Check it out, all you subscribers. At
Yeah, that's right. It's in the
AmericanPod.com.
archives.
And drugs. We did one on Narcos, which was
Yes, that's a really good one.
That was
Also, the
fun.
Narcos
That was
series.
fun.
That one-
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking. It's like it's interesting. Like they did Colombia and they did Mexico. So they did like the two right ones. They did like the 70s through the 90s. But there's so much stuff to still do in the 2000s. I mean, I wonder why they don't want to touch it, because like they ended in basically 99, right? With Chapo coming to power, right? Late 90s.
Yeah, I think it was good that they stopped. They stopped there. They could go to other theaters. They could do like Southeast Asia, just follow like Alfred McCoy's book.
That'd be
Oh,
interesting.
that would be interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Or do one that just follows the CIA around. Do the one on Venezuela and the actual cartel of the Suns that the CIA
just
helped
one that
set
follows the CIA
up.
around would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be
Like,
awesome. Well, I guess you get there with
we're in
Sicario,
Afghanistan this season. We're in, Vietnam. So Alex, there's one more super chat, I guess, since we extended this. Why does Mexico not export players? I think you're best positioned to answer this, because I know I'm not.
Why does Mexico export players?
Not export players.
Not export. The main reason is that the Mexican professional soccer league pays its players actually pretty well. So economically, there isn't much of an incentive to leave the country where you can stay home and make like a really good salary. The guys who leave are the ones who really want to like test themselves the top leagues in Europe. I wish more would do so, because that would improve the national team. But these owners are really the owners of the clubs have a lot of power. They have a lot of money, and it's probably the best paying league in the Americas, other than like the MLS and maybe one of the Brazilian leagues, but they pay really well. So that's why they generally don't leave.
All right. Well, that's a good
Totally.
place.
I took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew all of that.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We love you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.